Though Clarence is a simple show about kids being kids on the surface, there's a charm to the characters that is hard to resist. We see them trying to learn how to navigate life using optimism, romance, and imagination with each episode. But in a world that is always teaching new lessons, who can approach each obstacle and stay the most good? And although everyone in this good-natured show seems to be a good person, who ends up being the least good? I'm Anthony with Wicked Binge, and this is Clarence. Good to most good. Since the show features a lot of characters, we'll only be covering the main cast that has become developed and the one-time characters that made the biggest impressions. Our least good character has to be Sandy. When Clarence spends his summer helping his mom at the hair salon, we quickly learn about Sandy and how she was everything that one dreads about a caring customer. Sandy was rude, demanding, and abusive to the staff that were only trying to help her. Sandy would often drive over the fingers and backs of one of the stylists while shouting orders to Mare and the other woman on staff. When Clarence attempted to appease her with the used green shampoo he had been playing with, Sandy's response wasn't to simply scold the kid, she resorted to chasing him around to do who knows what. Thankfully, her reign of terror ended when she accidentally drove her rascal out into the desert. Moving on, we have Belson's father, Mr. Knowles. During the many times that we see Belson's home life, Mr. Knowles is never present, being far more concerned with running his company. When Clarence wandered into the business and was mistaken for the boss's son, we see how run down and underappreciated the employees were. We saw how the staff used Clarence as a way to get vacation time and raises, and by the end of the episode, Mr. Knowles was arrested for money laundering and more than a few counts of fraud. On top of that, Mr. Knowles most certainly had a hand in overindulging his son. This is clear from Belson's lack of discipline at home and the way the staff treats Clarence when they mistake him for Belson. He's just a terrible boss and neglectful father. Next, we have Balance. A weird, almost alternate version of Clarence, Balance was nearly the opposite of our main protagonist. Balance was snarky, sneaky, and as pervy as a children's show would allow him to get away with. As he settled into his first day, Balance warmed up to the idea of bullying the students to intimidate them, even going as far as to break Belson's game. When Clarence heard Balance inside his head and was told that Balance can make him think whatever he wants, it's easy to initially brush off the experience as one of Clarence's imaginative episodes. However, by the end, a ringleader shows up that confirms Balance can influence people's minds, hence why he was a circus attraction. Known as Mare's mother, Mrs. Wendell is up next. It's not unusual to have exhausting mothers in cartoons and sitcoms, but Mrs. Wendell was on a level of her own. She almost never stops talking or fiddling with things around the home. This need to control everything led her to causing Chad to have some unnecessary insecurity. This also made Mary feel like she wasn't free to behave how she wanted in her own home. Even Clarence, who is usually welcoming of everyone, hated the idea of sharing a room with his grandmother. Mrs. Wendell was a downright suffocating presence. From painting their kitchen in the middle of the night, to demolishing Clarence's school project, to rearranging the house, Mrs. Wendell was nowhere near a favorite character among fans. Thankfully, her husband seemed to have his head on much straighter than she did. The next spot goes to Joshua. Often seen in the background at a new job, Joshua is used to getting beaten up while doing what he gotta do, especially when Clarence and Sumo are involved. Every time we see him, Joshua is injured, and unlike many other cartoons, he stayed hurt. Still, he did his best when it came to whatever job he was doing. He can hardly be blamed for having a bit of a breakdown after all that happened on that first trip, but we still have to dock him points. After all, it was not a smart choice to take a bunch of kids on a wilderness trip out of pure spite, and encouraging a corporate takeover of a public school and brainwashing kids to settle as cashiers was incredibly shifty. Next is the questionable restaurant owner, Mariano. He isn't very prominent throughout the show. Still, Mariano was a central part of Clarence and Sumo's plan to give everyone crickets. It's just too bad that those weren't crickets that the boys collected in jars. This scene was disturbing and revealed how poor of a restaurant manager Mariano was. As Sumo and Clarence left, he made the comment that the cockroaches would always be there. This leaves us wondering just how long it's been since he accepted the pests being present in the kitchen. Next up on our list is Breen's mom, Tiffany. Overly concerned with appearances, she demanded a lot of her son. Tiffany refused to let her son be anything less than a presentable gentleman. She made sure he dressed a certain way, even after Breen expressed wanting to be more creative with his wardrobe. Tiffany never really got over her obsession with presentation. However, she did ease up a little after Breen and Clarence participated in the small competition in the mall. Our next spot goes to another mother from the show, Cynthia. Belson's mother, she's far more passive than most parents on the show. Though she was the one at home with their son, she wasn't sure how to manage him. For much of the show, she enabled Belson's behavior, but we give her credit for the time she did try to stand her ground. She tried to enforce Belson's one chore of taking out the trash, and tried scolding him for his neglect of their dog Tuffy. When Cynthia was tired of Belson walking all over her, she came up with a brilliant idea of sending the maid to another home, so Belson could have the chores as punishment for being disrespectful. And when Belson tried getting out of them by being lazy, Cynthia took it a step further by messing with the lives he accumulated on his game. Next to be mentioned on this list is Jeremy. Jeremy was one of those characters that were confusing and almost unsettling. After Clarence stayed up too late and forgot to close the garage door, he encountered a more fashionable copy of himself. This all happens while a dreaming aid is droning in the background, making the situation even more surreal. Jeremy is present to lead Clarence through what was likely his first lucid dream, playing games with him and sipping on his drink. When Clarence asks what would happen to Jeremy once he wakes up, Jeremy opts not to answer. He tries to keep Clarence dreaming for as long as possible, insisting that Clarence must have already closed the garage door and to not worry about it. As Clarence struggles to stay asleep, Jeremy becomes more desperate. The episode eventually ends as Jeremy begs for Clarence to not forget about him. That might have been the end of Jeremy, but he shows up toward the end of the series, revealing that Balance is reading to him, which begs the question, who or what is Jeremy really? We reluctantly have to give a lower spot to Percy. Percy was one of the more sensitive characters in the show, usually either giggling over something or crying. Honestly, who wasn't amused when Percy tried to marry Belson's and Chelsea's pictures, or felt for him when he cried while recounting Clarence's overuse of the bike horn? But that isn't what kept Percy from being ranked as more good than some of the other characters. Percy gained this spot due to his actions when he slept over at Clarence's and unleashed the fury of the critters in the garage. In an odd parody of the mob song from Beauty and the Beast, Percy howling in rage and then chanting "Get the boy" was terrifying. Next on our list is Melanie's blind date, Larry. Now, Larry is a nice enough guy with good intentions, but his cluelessness when it came to certain tasks nearly ended in some fatal injuries to those around him. When he's first introduced, it's as Miss Baker's date. He does a good job getting along with Clarence and showing concern for Melanie's emotional state, but taking a group of kids on a road trip to get ice cream and stopping his car in the middle of a freeway was a bad call. At least he had the kids hold hands before crossing the street though. Next on our list is Miss Shoop. Among the teachers, she was known as the strict enforcer. She didn't have the best skills when it came to meeting children halfway, but she did clearly care for the safety of her students. It's revealed through a flashback that Shoop had grown up with an overprotective mother herself. This explained a lot of the reasons why Shoop was particularly demanding when it came to rules. Shoop was also the one to find Clarence at West Aberdale with Sumo's help, speeding away when the principal caught them out front. And Shoop seemed to be the only one on staff that understood the complexities and the rules of Belson Ball. But Shoop lost a lot of points after she was reluctant to let people into the gym during a flood, and she allowed Belson to take the fall for defacing Reese's car in marinara sauce. Taking the next spot is Belson's cousin, Gary Knowles. Much like Belson, Gary is obnoxious in his own way, but unlike the resident rich kid, Gary was far more destructive and demanding. He used the excuse of Belson's dad not being around to act out, attempting to steal one of his cousin's game systems. In the end, Gary and Belson were able to meet each other halfway and team up against Clarence in a snowball fight. After his cousin, we have the self-proclaimed pranking king himself, Belson. Belson was a kid that was hard to get along with or impress. When he wasn't buried in whatever game he was obsessed with at the time, Belson spent his time trying to impress his peers. When interacting with his mother or Mr. Reese, Belson was always incredibly disrespectful and showed outright aggression to their authority. But that doesn't make Belson an irredeemable character. Thanks to Clarence, we learned that Belson had a fascination with dolphins. He kept that as a secret out of embarrassment and was able to make some heartfelt stories. And after being trapped in the zoo overnight, Belson met Clarence halfway to solve the worksheet after seeing the dolphin exhibit. We couldn't resist mentioning Nature Kate. When we're first introduced to Nature Kate, it's through Clarence's retelling of an adventure. As off the wall as this show is, Nature Kate clearly didn't jump off a cliff to save the kids from a charging rhino, but she was in charge of her own business and made a living off leading people through the wilderness. And when Joshua led Clarence, Percy, and Jeff to a dangerous situation, Kate showed up with Sumo to save them. However, we can't put her any higher on the good list because she's not perfect by any means. It's revealed that she frequently badmouthed Joshua in front of her groups when the two were dating, and after she saved Josh and the kids, she did reveal she was already seeing someone else while she had yet to end her relationship with Joshua. That isn't the most evil action she could commit, but still, it was something done without Josh's knowledge, and that's pretty messed up. Next on our list is Lucille. No, not Clarence's hen, but the garbage woman that the hen is named after. She was the one in charge of the garbage route that ran by Clarence's home. Though she clearly didn't care for Clarence's high energy at the break of dawn, she did appreciate how much respect Clarence had for her job. After Clarence got the attention of animal control to retrieve a mountain lion, Lucille offered Clarence some slightly damaged comic books to make his morning a little bit better. We also have to appreciate how Lucille didn't sugarcoat how dangerous a garbage truck could really be, telling her coworker to show Clarence his hand. After Lucille is another person person from Clarence's early morning adventures, Randy. The man who delivered the newspapers, Randy was a lot more willing to talk to Clarence. He didn't have the best work ethic, having fallen asleep rather than finishing his route, but he was a nice guy who opened up about how impressed he was with Clarence's handling of a mountain lion. He may not have had any comic books to offer as Lucille had, but Randy was ready in the wings with a hug, and then screams of terror over possible rabies. Our next spot goes to Sumo's dad, Mel. Mel always made the best of what was around. He had a knack for finding the use of everything he found and encouraged his kids to do the same. When Sumo took on the task of building a boat from scratch, Mel voiced his concerns on how well it would actually go, but that didn't mean he was going to stop his son from trying. Instead, Mel provided light so Sumo could work late, and was ready with another boat when Sumo inevitably sank. But Mel also bailed when he and Chad were at risk of getting blamed for everyone having cockroaches. Taking the next spot is Chelsea. Chelsea was never a character to just take anything lying down. She was always challenging the other kids to various competitions and encouraging risky behavior, but that didn't mean she was unhinged. Chelsea has a reputation with Mr. Reese as the troublemaker. Still, Chelsea also took precautions when it came to things like skateboarding, and she encouraged other kids to do the same. Chelsea also grew close with Sumo and Clarence, particularly loving how chaotic Sumo could be and how helpful Clarence was. Up next is the one-time substitute teacher, Meg Julep. She wasn't as composed as Miss Baker or Shoop, but she tried her best to follow the lesson plan. When Melanie showed up at the school to teach the children about cicadas, Meg wasn't bitter about having her first day interrupted. Instead, she stuck around and asked Miss Baker to teach her how to keep her head when in front of a class. We can't give Meg a higher ranking, but we really had to admire her awareness and determination to better herself. Hopefully, her next day as a substitute went a little smoother. Next on our list is Breen. Due to his mother's constant surveillance, Breen was always an uptight kid. He was well-groomed and well-mannered, but would always try to find ways to relax among his peers. During the times Breen was able to speak out of his shell, such as when he played over at Jeff's house or when he entered a competition at the mall, Breen was able to show how tenacious he truly was. And saving your friends from a runaway chainsaw during a flood is nothing to scoff at. Our next spot goes to the hopeless romantic Mr. Reese. He fancied acting as a detective when on school property, and so often got carried away when finding any culprits to misbehavior. That doesn't mean he was always right when it came to finding the person responsible, but it was endearing to see him play good cop bad cop with Clarence. Mr. Reese also encouraged Clarence's school comic, even when they were at risk of offending a parent or two. Reese was a dreamer that was always determined to help, even when he wasn't on the clock. Next on our list is Miss Melanie Baker. A passionate teacher, she was patient with the crazy that befell her classroom. Miss Baker often tried to meet her students halfway and came up with creative solutions to amend their behavior. She set up a scavenger hunt to inspire a few students to take more of an interest in history. When Clarence began misbehaving, Melanie was able to see that the anger came from when the boy missed a recess. Not only did she convince the school to give Clarence his own recess alone to make up for the lost time, but she was able to hunt down his buddy doll to play with. The next spot goes to Chad. Sure, he could be a little careless, but he really did care for Mary and Clarence. When things were beginning to go south during their camping trip, Chad's first reaction was to stress that Mary would kill him because they lost all the food he had for Clarence. He tried buying a second car just because Mary's mother kept talking about her ex Damien, and Chad wanted to live up to the expectations set. He tried giving Mary a night out to see Rick Backburn, getting VIP tickets because he knew Mary would appreciate it. And sure, Chad may have forgotten to pick up Clarence from school a time or two, but he also pushed the full-grown tree over to save Clarence from being swept away in a river. Though at first glance, Chad may look like a lazy guy that just sits around the house all day, the series shows Chad taking on various jobs to help out. He attracted business outside of Mary's salon while dressed as the Statue of Liberty, and he took on the pest control job when the cockroach infestation happened. Chad was shown to have some decent business sense when talking with Mel, adjusting their ideas to be safer and more sensible. And Chad was able to help Clarence with his plant care project, utilizing some of the tricks he picked up working on a farm. Following her boyfriend, Clarence's mother Mary takes the next spot. Though Mary has a lot on her plate, she always found a way to make things fun for her son. She made games to help make cleaning the house more of an adventure. She was patient with Chad and Clarence even when they made horrible messes that ranged from trashing the house to wrecking the ceiling in another person's house. When her mother showed up and began creating chaos for her son and boyfriend, it was one of the few times Mary lost her temper with another character. When Clarence had a rough time dealing with helping his friends all the time, Mary took the time to explain self-care and helped her son take some time for himself. When his plans for a big sleepover fell flat, Mary Mary swooped in to help make the night fun, even if it was only going to be with the family. It wasn't just on the home front that Mary was able to keep her cool either. When running the salon, Mary was always there to help with the most difficult and challenging customers. Her ability to give what her clients wanted led to a lot of repeat business and new customers. We see this when she helped Gunner and he returned with all of his biker buddies. The next character that gets a spot on this ranking is Gilbin. Considering there are characters like Balance in the show that can mess with a person's head, it's not too weird to see someone like Gilbin who could land a punch on Jeff without moving. Gilbin was seen throughout the backgrounds of episodes, giving commentary now and then in his own way. While Gilbin didn't speak and rarely moved, all of his peers understood him. The interactions suggested that Gilbin could be snarky or dark at times, but still, overall, he was a social butterfly and was considerate of those around him. Taking the next place is Jeff. A notorious clean freak and controlling playmate, he didn't like when his method of doing things was interrupted and was prone to lashing out. But Jeff also had times where he tried to be optimistic and approach a subject with a level head. When Clarence went overboard with his bike horn, Jeff felt that intervention was the right approach to try and get Clarence to be empathetic over what he was doing. Next, we have Camden's father, Hershey. One of the more involved parents, Hershey was the one to insist the playground equipment be changed out after his son Camden got hurt playing. Luckily, Hershey was able to come to his senses and let the kids be a little reckless on the playground, recounting his own youth when he fell off the slide plenty of times. Hershey was also there when Greg and Clarence went camping, offering firewood and trying to hunt down the two when he heard cries of distress. Following his dad is Camden himself. Much like Breen, he was coddled to a degree. His father instilled in him a helpful nature, so Camden was always offering to help. He didn't take offense when Clarence suggested he not participate in throwing dirt on the playground, well aware of his father's overprotectiveness. When Hershey pocketed all of Chad's money they found in the river, Camden disagreed with the choice, insisting they tell the park ranger. The concern fell on deaf ears, but we commend Camden's integrity. Taking a spot after their son, we have EJ and Sue. They're loving and supportive of their son, while also making clear efforts to help him come out of his shell. They recruited Clarence's help to get Jeff to enter the cook-off and always encouraged Jeff's creativity. When Jeff was revealed to have an extra toe, EJ and Sue expressed that they wanted to be open about Jeff's choice and asked Clarence to respect Jeff's privacy on the issue. Next, we have Clarence's other best friend, Sumo. Sumo was often seen as the chaotic force of our main protagonists, but he wasn't an evil kid. Sumo would often go along with Clarence's adventures because it beat being bored all day. However, he also had times where he openly disagreed with his friend. Sumo also took great care of his bird Hot Sauce, helping to mend it. And while Sumo loved a good prank, he was also more than willing to tell the truth if he felt it was necessary. Our next place goes to the adventurous Amy Gillis. Amy was always up for exploring and inviting Clarence along. She liked to teach those around her about the subject she was learning, and impressively, she was also always ready for the millions of questions that followed. When Belson challenged her and Clarence to get off of the rock, Amy stood her ground and fought for the spot they had been searching for all day. Much like Chelsea, Amy took precautions when it came to being adventurous, and when the day ended and they had to head home, Amy would express thanks to Clarence. We don't really see her in other episodes, suggesting that she decided to live with her other parent, but still, she was a sweet and memorable character. Our bronze medal of most good goes to Ashley. Though she wasn't a focus character for long, she was very sweet when she did appear on the screen. After being encouraged by her friends over how much she and Clarence got along, Ashley had decided to ask Clarence on a date. When things began to get a little awkward, Ashley didn't make fun of Clarence. Instead, she was content going back to simply being friends. And what better way to make it official than to chase frogs behind the school? Our silver medal of most good is being awarded to the Charlie Brown-inspired character, Brady Brown. Incredibly shy, he spent a lot of his time keeping to himself. His first real exposure on the show was after he and Clarence were forgotten at school, leading to the boys having to walk home, or at least attempt to walk home. Though Brady was obviously uneasy with how Clarence approached the many obstacles, Brady was also level-headed. His main problem was that he just had issues speaking up because he genuinely believed no one would listen. And when Clarence did, Brady gained more confidence. In later episodes, Brady was far more open and able to joke around with his classmates. That didn't mean these interactions went well, but it was a step up from isolating himself. Taking the gold medal of most good, we have the star himself, Clarence. We acknowledge that Clarence isn't a perfect kid by any means, but he did try his best to try and brighten the days of those around him. Clarence took a lot of pride in helping his mother and his friends. Even a whole episode tackled how Clarence felt guilty for not wanting to be around his friends for a day when he learned what self-care was from his mother. Clarence was one of the few people to see the softer side of Belson, encouraging Belson's love of dolphins and making stories for them. When Jeff and Sumo had arguments, Clarence was the one to try and get them to make peace. He was always able to speak his mind and make a boring situation fun, making him a charming and lovable character. Before we go, we wanted to hand out some extra medals to the characters that fit them the best. First, we have the Wrath Medal, going to Sandy. We covered earlier in the list that Sandy was downright abusive to everyone that she came into contact with. She ran over people with her rascal, she shouted at the staff, and she tried attacking Clarence. Sandy was always trying to get the best deal she could, demanding she was in the right to do so simply because she was a customer. The Greed Medal, we're giving to Belson. Even without knowing his home life, Belson wasn't the best at sharing. All he was worried about were his games and getting his way. He continuously went out of his way to be seen as the best when it came to pranks, talking to girls, and oddly enough, eating the most eggs. The Lust Medal, we're giving to Mr. Reese. There's been more than a couple of times when Mr. Reese was seen hitting on Miss Baker. It even got to the point that he pulled out an engagement ring to propose, even though he had only known her for a few months. The Sloth Medal, we're awarding to Chad. While Chad was a good guy, sleep and lounging were a default setting for him. He's made the mistake of forgetting Clarence at school simply because he was easily distracted by the TV. Even when in the woods facing a straining situation, Chad kept falling asleep in the log as he was talking. Next, we have the Pride Medal, going to Jeff. Jeff hated sharing the spotlight with others, and while we understand he didn't want to share his birthday with Gilbin, getting into a fight was an overreaction. And when Clarence announced he had a date, Jeff's first reaction was to wonder how Clarence got a girlfriend before he did. Finally, we have the Gluttony Medal, which goes to Breen. There are plenty of people in this cartoon that like to indulge in snacks and Rough Rider's chicken, but Breen was the only one to eat something he knew he would have an allergic reaction to simply because he could. But thankfully, Breen was able to recognize that it wasn't worth it in the end. But what do you think? Who are the most good and evil characters in Clarence? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.